everyone, it's Christina with My Confection Obsession, and today I'm going to be making an Orca cake. So I'm making this cake because recently I made a hedgehog cake that my niece Aubrielle suggested, and of course I have another niece that wanted a cake made for her, so my niece Kinsey suggested that I make a whale cake. So this cake is for Kinsey, and here's how we're going to do it. So in front of me, I have like a cone shape, and I made this using Rice Krispie treats, and you can actually mold Rice Krispie treats into any shape that you want, and you just use the regular recipe minus the butter. And so you basically just kind of mold it and you want to squish it down and compact it really, really well. So you're squishing it together as much as you can. And then I let this dry overnight, just so it will harden a little bit. So I have my base shape here. So my whale is going to be coming out of the water. Like the cake is gonna be the water. And so I did make kind of like a template here, just of the shape that I'm gonna want my whale to be. So he's popping up out of the water. And so I am gonna carve this down a little bit. So when you're using Rice Krispie treat, you can just cut it and carve it to any shape that you like. And the reason it's a lot easier than using cake, because it's more sturdy and it's lighter too. So this isn't super heavy when I sit it on top of the cake. So I'm gonna go ahead and carve this shape down. So I did obviously draw this ahead of time because I wanted to make sure I was gonna get a shape that I liked. So I can still kind of mold it a little bit, so I'm just trying to round it out. So after you have the shape of the whale that you're happy with, what we're gonna do next is we're actually gonna cover it with buttercream icing, because if we put fondant over this, it's gonna be really bumpy, and so I wanna give it a smooth surface. So I'm gonna put a layer of buttercream, and then we do want it to crust, so after we apply this, it's gonna go into the fridge. So after I have put buttercream all over this, I am going to want this to crust, so I'm gonna pop it into the fridge or freezer. I'm actually gonna do the freezer so that it goes a little bit faster, and we do want it to harden before we apply the fondant. While our Orca is hardening in the freezer, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to work on the cake a little bit. And so this cake is gonna end up obviously looking like ocean. And so here I have, it's 4-layer 6-inch cake, so I wanted some height. And what I picture is, I picture it kind of like a really darker blue on top, and then I'm gonna airbrush the sides just to give it a little bit of depth. So I'm gonna start by just putting some navy buttercream on the top. So most of the top is going to be covered by our whale, so I'm not very concerned about getting it super smooth, but I do want it to just to look pretty clean. So now that I've done my top part of the water, I'm going to work on airbrushing the sides. The airbrushing system that I'm using is just one that I got online. I'm using the Cake Boss airbrush system, and so I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using 2 different colors of blue. So I'm gonna start conservatively, and I'm going to use the light blue first. And I'm just gonna be putting this around the bottom of the cake. So I'm adding that to my airbrush. This guy likes to vibrate a lot. So I'm gonna use the low mode. So after I airbrush my cake, I do want it to dry a little bit because it's pretty wet. And I can also see I should have covered my cake board, so I'm definitely gonna clean that off. It actually wipes up really easy, so I'm not very worried about it. Same with the cake board. I can either leave it or I can just wipe it right off. So while my airbrush is drying, I am going to work on my whale. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cover this guy in black fondant. So I'm just using black fondant that I purchased. So this is satinized black fondant, and I use it all the time if you guys watch my tutorials, so I will put that link in the show notes also. So after I cover my whale with black fondant, I'm going to start working on adding some more of the details, like the white and his fins. Cutting out the fondant details. So you guys can see I already did the template for his eye, or like the eye space, that white marking. And then I'm gonna do his dorsal fin and his little side fin. I don't know what that's called. So I'm gonna use black for that. I'm not worried about getting cornstarch on the black because I'm gonna go over it the whole thing with shortening, and it will come right off and it'll end up looking shiny actually. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and place these. So it's gonna kind of look like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting my dab and hold on this to get some of these pieces down. So to stick all these pieces on here, I'm using Wilton dab and hold. And so I'm just simply going to paint a little bit, a thin layer on the back here. And I love this stuff, especially when I'm adding fondant decorations to a cake. I used to use water and I felt like it didn't adhere as well. And with this, I've never had a problem with things falling off. It sticks really nicely. And then I'm not gonna glue this on until I put it on the cake. But he's gonna go like that. So I'm gonna set this guy aside. I'm gonna focus on my cake. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I am actually gonna place my whale onto my cake. And so he's gonna go into the center. So I think I'm actually gonna put a little bit of fresh buttercream here. And then I'm gonna insert some cake pop sticks here. Well, I'm gonna try to see if I can get that in there so that it'll help stabilize into the cake. If I feel like it's coming apart, I'm going to stop. I think he's okay. There. Okay, so I want him to go in the middle of my cake. Okay, so now that I have placed my whale, what I want to do is I want to add some fondant pieces to make it look like he's breaking through the water like waves. So I have some blue fondant here, and I'm just going to cut out almost like little triangle shapes and see how that looks if I like it. So I'm just placing these. I'm not gluing them down right now, just to see if I like how it looks. So I know I'm gonna wanna kind of bend some of these and mold these, like fold them a little bit, just to give them some depth. So I'm gonna go ahead and start gluing these down, my dab and hold. So I am making sure to kind of curl some of these, give it a more realistic look. And I'm kind of pinching and folding as well. And again, I'm gonna go over this with shortening and take that cornstarch off when I clean this up. just cutting out like little triangle shapes. And I'm making them kind of rounded, like not too sharp. And those are sticking without me putting anything there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint just a little bit of white onto the waves to make it look more realistic. So I'm just using some white food coloring and I'm going to paint it directly onto the fondant. So I want to be really careful with this. I'm going to test out over here. So my cake is almost done. The last thing I want to do is I want to pipe just a little border down here. I like that my cake board is blue. It looks like water to me, but I do want to clean up this edge, so I'm just going to use a piping tip and pipe some navy frosting there. Okay, so my orchid cake is done and I love how he turned out, and I also hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial as well. And if you have any ideas for cakes that you'd like to see me make, go ahead and leave those ideas in the comments below. And also don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Twitter.